Hello, and today we got ex-Hearts player and 2014 World Cup player Ryan McGowan. How are you doing today, Ryan?
Very well, thank you, mate. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Right, so let's talk about your first memory in football.
First memory would probably be just playing in the back garden as a youngster. Obviously, with Dylan, I was quite lucky that I had a younger sibling, only maybe 2 years younger than me. So, yeah, probably my earliest memories was playing out the back with him and pretending to be all the superstars that we used to watch on TV.
That's great. So, what was the first time you were asked to sign an autograph by a fan?
Oh, I was probably. I went to Japan with an Australian under-17 camp. We had like a little tournament in Japan when I was 16. So that was probably the first time I think I got asked for an autograph because like that there was a lot of fans at the game and they were waiting for you either before you went in or afterwards. And that was probably the first time that I worked out that I had a terrible signature and had to change it.
So, who's the best teammate you've had? You played with a lot of great players, but who's the best that you've had?
Playing wise or just friend wise?
Like both.
Both. Both. Playing. Oh, that's a good question. I've got a lot of good mates. Johnny Stewart, who was still is one of my best mates. He was one of my teammates at Hearts under-19s and kept in touch with him. So he's probably my friendliest teammate. But I'm also quite close with Tom Rogic at Celtic. So footballing wise, they're probably my two football friends. Best player I've played with. I'm lucky enough to play with some really good players. Scatchell's up there, Templeton on his day, Cahill with Australia and Jednak, Rogic, Moy. There's been a lot of players. And then in China, I played with Nikita Jelavic, the ex-Rangers and Everton striker. So take your pick out of them, really. I don't want to offend any of them. So I'll name 10 of them.
Great players are. So, what's the best stadium you've played in?
Oh, best stadium. Jesus, put me on the spot here. Best stadium I've played in. I think like in Scotland, everyone likes Tynecastle. It's a really, really good atmosphere, and I really enjoyed the night games there. I think I played a couple of derbies at night and a few times against Celtic. So there's probably a good atmosphere. And then some of the stadiums we played at in the World Cup in Brazil, they were really good. Obviously, playing in the World Cup, you have an unbelievable atmosphere, but even like the standards of the changing rooms and everything was first class in terms of that. So probably one of the stadiums at the World Cup was pretty good.
So let's go on to the World Cup. What was like the best experience you had out in Brazil at the World Cup?
It was probably playing because I went there thinking that there was probably going to have to be an injury or something odd to happen for me to get in. I realised that I was a squad player, so in a way it was pretty good in terms of the injury that I didn't have any time to think about playing. I'd just come back from my warm up, so I didn't even get sent out to do a warm up. They'd realised that I've just come back, and within probably 2 minutes of the play pulling his hamstring, by the time he went down, got treatment, came off, I was on. So from a personal point of view, it was pretty good. I couldn't get too nervous and just had to get on with it. But that was probably the best time. It was probably later on that night when I couldn't sleep, lying in my hotel room thinking I've just made an appearance in a World Cup, which is for a lanky boy from Adelaide is a pretty good goal, I think.
That Tim Cahill assist wasn't bad though, was it?
Yeah, that was probably one of those things that it's not until after the game that you realise you got an assist. But yeah, it was probably pretty special in terms of, we just conceded a goal and then to score in that way. And then later on in the match, we scored a penalty. So, we're 2-1 up against Holland, who had just beaten Spain. I think it was 5-1 or 6-0 in the first game. So, that was pretty surreal feeling, knowing that you had Holland on the ropes in a World Cup game. And probably the whole World Cup experience was something that will live with me for a long, long time.
So, what's the best boots you've ever worn?
Best boots? Some good questions here. Probably I had I used to like the Adidas Predators, the black ones with the red
Yeah.
tongue. That was probably when I was 14 or 15, and Harry Kuehl was like one of my favorite players growing up, and he had those types of boots. So whatever boots he had, I used to try and copy. But I had a pair of white and blue Predators that I had a lot of key moments in. So played played at White Hart Lane with them on, won the Scottish Cup with them on, made my debut for Australia with them on. There's a few things. There was a few, maybe a year or 18 months. I used to wear them in games. I used to wear them in training. So I really spaced out them, and they're probably, when I look back in a lot of photos and that those boots were pretty special to me. So they would be up there as well.
Who's the worst teammate you've had for like playing pranks and stitching you up, that sort of thing?
Jason Thompson, he was up there. So he played for, I think he's Arbroath at the moment. So when I was a young boy, he was a couple of years older than me in the first team, and he was always up to mischief. And I probably fell for a few too many of his pranks. But again, he's one of my good pals, and it was a great teammate to me, and one that I really enjoyed.
Who's the best player you've come up against? And to follow on from that, who's the best player you swapped shirts with?
Oof. Best player I've played against is probably Neymar. Played Brazil in Brazil. Got beat 6-0, so we didn't play particularly well. But yeah, he was really good that day. So he was probably the best player I've ever played against. Probably I have to say, probably him. But then we played against Gerrard and Suarez. Played against some top quality strikers. So probably, but I'd probably say Neymar shades it.
And while we're on the topic of kits, what's the best and worst kit you've worn?
Worst kit was when I went on loan to Partick Thistle. I had obviously I was on loan, and they used to just have squad numbers. And I remember, I think there's a photo somewhere, and I had a big, massive, baggy Partick Thistle top on, and I think I had tiny shorts. So I had a really baggy t-shirt on, and then tiny shorts and tiny socks. So that's probably one of the only times I felt a little bit silly running around. So I'd probably give that was my worst kit. My best kit, I really like the Australia World Cup ones that we played in the World Cup. I really like that strip, and probably the Hearts Cup final top. I really like that one, just probably on a personal note with the memories that we made from that season.
So, what's the worst ever performance you've played in?
I think a few fans would be able to name a fair few performances, but probably like worst performance. Trying to think. I'm quite harsh on myself in terms of I don't particularly feel I played too many good games. Well, I'm very, very hard on my mistakes that I make, or even throughout the games, if people don't pick it up, I'm quite critical of my performance. But probably one of my maybe Brazil game in Brazil, felt maybe let myself down in terms of maybe probably wasn't ready. I was just coming off pre-season. I was in China. And maybe wasn't ready for that game and how good they were. So I was probably really disappointed in my performance, probably against Brazil in Brazil, I think.
What's the best moment you've had as an international player?
International player, probably making my debut, I guess. That was against Scotland as well at Easter Road, which was perfect for me because I was at Hearts at the time, and it was on my birthday, which made it extra special. But as a kid growing up, it's that old cliches that you do want to play for your country, and I'd played probably maybe a year to 18 months in the first team at Hearts, and I thought that I wasn't sure if I was going to get a game. For example, I didn't know if the coach fancied me or not, and I hadn't heard anything. And then probably had a phone call about a week before the camp started to say that I'd be involved in it, and then you start getting the nervous butterflies, and then I was lucky enough to play on my actual birthday. So that was probably a dream come true to, say that you've played for your country. No matter how many times you play is good. But that first one, I think, is always the hardest one. And I was very lucky that it was in Scotland. It was in Edinburgh, so I had a lot of people there that had helped me at Hearts to get to where I was. So on a personal level, I was very lucky to have a lot of loved ones at the game and see me make my debut. And I guess a lot of people don't realise the sacrifices that people in the background make. Your family, your parents, brothers, cousins, that they all follow this journey for you. So sometimes getting that into international recognition is pretty special for them, maybe a little bit more than myself.
So let's move on to your club career. What was the best moment of that?
Probably Hearts winning the Scottish Cup. Probably the biggest club game I've been involved in. Just with all the pressure and Hibs having not won it for so long. The way that we won the semi-final, it was just kind of built up to be a massive match, and it hadn't happened in hundreds of years, and the chances are it probably won't happen again. So that was probably my best moment in the club career. Also won the Chinese Cup in China, which was a pretty big deal in China in terms of getting straight into the Champions League. So played in some big club games, but yeah, probably the Scottish Cup final was the biggest club game I've played in. Yeah.
So just a final few quick fire ones. What was the last game you played before all this COVID shutdown?
Played against Dillon. I played a Western Sydney derby. That was probably in the middle of March. It was behind closed doors, so that was my last competitive game, which was a few months ago now.
Did you win?
We drew 1-1. So unfortunately, I didn't beat them this season. We played 3 games. They beat us twice and drew. So not heard the end of that from Dillon, but hopefully we can get them back next season.
And just finally, when was the last time you had to pay for a ticket to go to a football match?
Probably the Hearts Scottish Cup final against Celtic. Went along, just wanted to go with all my mates and father-in-law. So we got a big batch of tickets. And didn't want to be in like the sort of posh seats or that. So just spoke with Lockie and said to get some tickets in with the riffraff, and along I went. So that was probably the last time I paid. But most of the times I do pay, but at Hearts I'm sometimes relatively lucky that I can get a couple of tickets if it's a quieter games. If it's a big games or if it's derbies, I'll pay and go along because I feel like that's the right thing to do. But sometimes you do get invited as a guest to go along. But last one was Scottish Cup final against Celtic.
Right, Ryan. Thank you for coming along. It's been a pleasure.
Perfect. No worries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.